Hey, welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. This is now our fifth and last video in this module. And I do apologize, the last couple of videos have been over 20 minutes each, and that's typically longer than I like those videos to be. But I think as you can tell from those videos, presuming you've made your way all the way through them, of course, that I think it's important to tweeze out some of the examples at length in order to give you a better feel for the material. And so that's why they're a little longer. Apologize for that, but that's the best way I could figure to give you what I wanted to give you in those particular lectures. And in this last video, video number 5 now, we look at, as you can see here, the stakeholder perspective. The stakeholder perspective on the external environment and the primary players in your external environment. I think it is important for us to talk about the topic of perspective. Your perspective, your framing, the way that you frame the narrative or the story, your perspective on things defines everything in terms of how you approach solving potential problems and challenges, how you accomplish organizational goals. Your framework, your perspective creates the opportunity for you to think innovatively and creatively. So, after this video, I hope that you will be able to explain the stakeholder approach to viewing the environment. That's the main takeaway of this particular video. Now, this is an illustration from your textbook, as you can see. It is figure 3.1 in chapter 3 of the text, and it shows what we've already covered in the very first video of this module, right? That when we talk about the environment, we talk about some very specific things like a general environment, a task environment, both those environments being external to the organization, and an internal environment, the stuff inside the organization that has enormous amounts of significance and influence. Now, the reason we show you this, because this is review, by the way, right, is in order to show you this next slide, which is figure 3.2, which is the stakeholder view. Now, again, this looks very similar to the previous slide, doesn't it? It shows a larger environment, which in this particular slide, instead of calling it the general environment, we called it secondary stakeholders. And instead of the task environment, we call them primary stakeholders. And then, of course, in the center is the firm with its internal environment. What are we trying to communicate when we translate the first diagram into the stakeholder view you're looking at now? What we're trying to bring to the forefront is the perspective, or the view, or the understanding that all of the players in the general environment are players that are significant, are groups or individuals that we need to consider. Why? Because they are affected potentially by the actions and behavior of the firm. They have a stake in the outcome. They have a stake, an interest in the behavior, the decisions, the implications of particular behaviors of the firm on their piece of the environment. And so if you look at the slide, consider the types of secondary stakeholders that are listed in this diagram. Other business groups, neighbors, the media, citizens groups, consumer groups, animal rights groups, civil rights groups, environmentalists. All of those folks have a stake, an interest in the outcome and behaviors of the firm. They have a right to be concerned if a firm acts in such a way as to violate particular groups' civil rights. They have a right to be concerned if the company is behaving in such a way as to harm the natural environment. And in that way, they have a stake in the outcome. Now, when you look at the task environment, you see that translated then in the green to primary stakeholders. You can, of course, understand how owners, buyers, employees, suppliers, consumers, those are all groups that are directly affected by the moves of the firm. And that's why, based on their behavior, the decisions the firm makes, they have a stake in the outcome. They are primary stakeholders directly affected, directly influenced by the firm. And that's what we want to try to give you, is to broaden out your perspective, your view, the story you tell yourself about your external environment. Yes, there are elements that need to be analyzed and understood, and we gave you a tool in the last lecture, Porter's 5 forces, in order to do that. But those groups are more than just those groups are more than just influences and forces to be analyzed. They are oftentimes human beings and groups of human beings who are directly affected by your decisions, by your moves, by your behavior in the marketplace. And therefore, we consider them not simply forces to be analyzed, but sharers with a stake in our out. We look at them as sharing in interest, sharing a stake in the outcome, and that's why they need to be considered. So, what are the best ways that managers can embrace stakeholders? By gathering information about stakeholders in the environment and finding out what it is that they have a stake in the outcome. Collecting information allows organizations to anticipate changes in their environment and develop plans to respond to these changes. Some techniques that we use to collect information from stakeholders: customer surveys, economic forecasting, trend analysis, right? Reading what is going on in our social cultural environment, seeing how the different opinions of different consumer groups are changing over time, all these kinds of things, right? We use very particular tools in order to find out what is going on in our external environment that we need to be concerned about, that we need to care about, that we need to advocate for, that we need to defend, that we need to participate in. All of these things are part of the contemporary firm responding appropriately to the stakeholders in the environment. You cannot afford to ignore your stakeholders. The opinions of your buyers and the public at large can very, very quickly sink your organization or be the very thing that lifts and buoys up your organization above your competitors. Organizations interact with and manage their external environment to do at least a couple of things: to lower the degree of threat in the external environment and to leverage, exploit, and take advantage of the opportunities that are in the environment. Common interaction techniques include, as you can see they're listed, public relations, boundary spanning, lobbying, negotiation, forming alliances, organizational restructuring. All these, of course, will be discussed in your textbook as well. So, this very, very short video to end our third module. What did we look at? We want you to be able to look at the external environment and view it as a collection of stakeholders. Stakeholders who are affected by and have an interest in and therefore will influence your behavior as a manager and as a firm because they have a stake in your outcome. Well, I hope that's helpful in this look at the environment that managers work in, the environment that managers must consider as we make decisions and plan and work through managing the firms and the organizations that we are given influence in. Hope this is helpful. We will see you now in the next module. Take care. We'll see you soon.